I'm going to cue some music. Can you hear that? Yeah, okay. We are family. All right. So, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Beaver Politics. This is the Rainbow Connection, and we will be talking about LGBTQIA history throughout Canada, along with legislation that may impact our rights.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically today, the legislation that has been put across Canada that targets transgendered youth and trans rights across the board.
We're going to start actually by introducing ourselves as well. This is our first show,
Yes.
so not everyone knows who we are. Um,
That's fair.
so, just actually want to plug a few things. First of all, this is on Beaver Politics. Our show will be every Friday from 12:30 noon Eastern to 2:30. And there are many other shows on Beaver Politics. You can just go to our page, and I think the first pinned video shows all the different shows that we have. You'll also be able to scroll through and see other promos for the shows as well. And remember, tapping is clapping, and sharing is caring. All right, so I guess we'll start with our introductions. You want to go first?
All right. I am the Pasty Native. I am a white passing Indigenous trans man. Very proud of being trans and tend to talk about it too much as far as people are concerned. I was raised in a very small northern community where there was a lot of prejudice and a lot of targeting of the 2S LGBTQIA community. Uh, and have spoken out against the other provinces that have chosen to attack LGBTQIA rights. Same within Ontario, because Ontario passed legislation that you can't get taught about gender identity. Yeah, but I've got three wonderful little boys that I'm trying to teach to be open minded and kind, which is not easy in the state of the world today. So I'm hoping that also this show I can look at them and be like, hey, you want knowledge? Here. Because my oldest is 10. And he's starting to get into that, even questioning his own, what he likes and what he is as a human. But yeah, I'm very happy to be here and I'm very happy to talk about this stuff. Hi, Moose.
Sorry. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Sean. I've been out since, well, not to give away my age, but I'm 40 something, and I've been out since, well, out. So when you come out, it's always in stages, and you're always coming out. Even these days, you started new work, meet new people, you're always coming out. But I always start by telling people I came out to myself at 15 years old, because that's like the first important step, is just accepting yourself. And then slowly I told friends and eventually my parents. Um, what else? I work in the mental health field. I have a degree in psychology. Um, and I take care of my nephew, who is 12 years old and who is on the spectrum. I used to work at a LGBTQ youth center, which I loved the job. If I could do that again, I would. It just didn't pay the bills, and now I have someone taking care of me, so I need to make sure that those bills are paid. What else? I don't know if anything else is relevant at the moment. I guess you'll get to know me more as we go on. Um, and actually, this is probably a good point too, is that everything stated in this live from Pasty and myself is not necessarily the opinion of Beaver Politics. It's our own opinions. We are both progressive. and because we care about other people, and actually all of Beaver politics. We're all progressives, Liberal, MDP, other party supporters, who all care about other people, and that's why we're here, is to help educate people and make people aware about these situations that affect us all. All right, so I guess that's done with the introductions. Did you want to go first, speaking about the trans laws?
Okay, sure. Um, so since 2023, Canada has seen an uptake in anti-trans legislations in Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, Saskatchewan and New Brunswick's. If a child comes out to their teachers, they have put legislation in place that the school has to forcibly out the child and get the parental consent before being allowed to use the child's preferred name or anything like that, which can lead to a lot of not great things like homelessness if your family's not accepting, or even possibly putting that child's life in danger. Uh, in the intimate, because even being homeless, that puts the child's life in danger. But whereas if the parents get violent, I sadly had a case where my dad was not accepting. My mom was, but I didn't live with her. She was out of city, and he kicked me out when I came out. So the thought that if the school were to have done that, that there's a chance that that could have been a lot worse than what it was. And then in Alberta, they passed three bills. One that affects uh, children being able to use their preferred pronouns and preferred names in a safe environment where they're not being forcibly outed to their parents. Uh, and one that made it so that somebody who died as the opposite of what they were born at birth, or even as non-binary, they're not allowed to participate in gym classes or sports within Alberta. And it also affects children being able to access gender affirming care, which, just throwing that out there, is only because the only thing you can get across Canada under the age of 18 is puberty blockers that do not cause any permanent or long lasting side effects. It just pauses puberty. And that was passed in the ones in Alberta were passed in December 12th, 2024. And it was three pieces of legislation, which is absolutely terrifying. Yeah. I can't hear you, Sean.
I muted because I sneezed. Sorry. I just wanted to say, yeah, all these laws are scary, and they're just all fueled by misinformation, not science at all. Like this whole anti-science movement is cracked. I don't know. Can I use that word? Yeah, I guess I could use that word. It's not a bad word, but it's a word that my nephew taught me. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
Uh, doesn't puberty blocker save lives in some? Yeah, there, and the legislation that stops anyone under the age of 18 being able to get puberty blockers also affects cisgender children that may require puberty blockers because in some cases there's conditions that cause an extremely early onset of puberty, and they're used in those cases for cisgender children uh, to be able to live normally and not be weird or made fun of because they're developing at a different rate.
Yeah, and that's true. Actually, a lot of gender affirming care isn't just for um, trans people. Like a lot of gender affirming care helps a lot of cis heterosexual people from during menopause, or even hair transplants for men going bald. That's considered gender affirming care.
Yeah. Uh, and like I know myself, uh, because of the fact, and even for like gender affirming care under the age of 18 for puberty blockers, you have to have parental consent all across Canada. There's no such thing as a minor being able to go into a doctor's office and be like, hey, I want this, and the doctor give it without parental consent. I sadly went through it where my father refused to allow me to go on puberty blockers because I came out when I was like 14. I've been out for an exceedingly long period of time now and have been put through the ringer. Um, my dad wasn't accepting about it at all, very much denied it, didn't want anything to do with it. But I know in a lot of ways, had I been able to get that when I was younger, it would have saved me from a lot of my unaliving attempts
Mm.
and my issues with depression and anxiety and all sorts of loveliness. Um, I have lived in a world and seen both sides of how people treat me when I identify as a man, and life, what it was like when I was identifying as female, and neither are great.
I can imagine.
But I can at least feel comfortable with who I am now, finally accessing testosterone. And it's taken me over 10 years to be able to fight and to be able to get my gender affirming surgeries. They're not something that's easily accessible within Canada. There are rules and regulations around it that stop you from being able to get them if you don't have all your ducks in a row. And
Mm.
specifically for anyone under the age of 18, there's no chance at surgeries. There's no chances of hormone replacement therapy under the age of 18 whatsoever. And there's a lot of misinformation that's saying that we're mutilating kids, which is a lie, which is the basis for most of these anti-trans legislations that have been put into place.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. Like I said before, misinformation is running wild and is just attacking the queer community from all sides. Like even with drag queens are sexualizing children. No, they're not. Oh, should I even say that? I shouldn't even say that. Drag queens are interacting with children in a very safe environment in the library, usually reading books.
And I don't know, but my mom, okay, one of her best friends as I was growing up was wonderful drag queen, wonderful drag queen, Anthony. And I was the safest with the mom's friend group, and my mom and even Anthony made the comment of if it was a drag queen that was doing the crime, you'd know it because there'd be a trail of glitter leading to them. But drag queens are some of the nicest people I've ever met, or like I've had a friend who went to a drag show, and yeah, she did end up in danger, but it was because of the cis head white man that was bartending that drugged her, and it was a gaggle of trans women that saved her.
Oh, well, that's good. Sorry, I'm trying to put on my pin. I got this pin,
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
you are safe with me. I have another pin too on my bag. Like I carry a merce, so I have it on my bag because when I go out in public, I want people to know that they're safe with me. Because you never know, you know, when someone needs to find a safe person, especially if you're like a young trans person who knows how people treat you in public. Like it's very unpredictable. Are you reading some of the comments?
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I just kind of want to like fill in like the blanks, so there's
Yeah.
not a lot of dead air, which will come to both of us as we get used to this as well.
I also know in Ontario, when the Conservatives were first elected into the majority in Ontario, there was a piece of legislation that was put in place that made it illegal to teach about gender identity and most of the LGBTQIA within sex ed courses,
Okay.
which find oh so confusing because Doug Ford walks in the Pride parades
He
in
does?
Toronto.
I didn't know he did.
Yeah.
Well, last time I heard was that he'd rather go to his cottage on that weekend because it's also usually coincides with Canada Day weekend in Toronto.
Oh, he's done it a few times and he's helped with planning in the past. So that's why I'm like, why did you put the legislation in place if you support the people? And
Well, it's all like for like for perception, you know. I mean, really doesn't care about the queer community, and
no, he's doing it for making himself look good. And
exactly,
that's what a lot of politicians sadly do.
yeah,
Or they choose to demonize the 2S LGBT community,
yeah.
which also makes no sense to me. Because, like, specifically trans, why target trans? We make up 1%, 1 single % of the entire world's population.
But you know why? It's because it's only 1%. Not much knowledge is out there, and it's very easy to demonize them and spread misinformation about them. It's not like, especially in Canada, I don't think it's as easy to demonize like the LGB part of the alphabet mafia.
I
Um,
did want to stop for a second and ask you, are we recording?
I think it automatically records.
Okay, I'm not sure because I've heard others have to put the recording on, so I don't know.
Oh, I didn't see anything that said record.
Okay.
I guess we'll find out afterwards. Sorry again, Jana, if you're watching. But I was told that it automatically records, or well,
Okay. I
that
just
it'll
wanted to
hold
make
on.
sure so that way we're not like, what
Yeah.
did we do?
Well, if it doesn't record this one, we'll just have to do everything all over next week. No, we'll
Okay.
have new topics next week. But yeah, well, hopefully it's recording. And if not, again, sorry, Jana.
Thank you, Moose.
Yeah, see, it records automatically. Okay, that's good to know. That's good to
Okay.
know. It's funny
All
because
right.
yesterday when we were doing the training, I was like, yes, like this is easy, I can do it. And then like when I logged in today to start getting it set up, like everything just went out of my head, and it was like, no, you do not have memory of that happening.
Oh, lovely. All right.
Anyways,
Do
right?
we want to move on to some of the history things
Yeah,
with the 2S LGBTQ?
yeah,
And do you want to take the lead on that one?
yeah, for sure. I cut out a lot of things because actually there's a lot more than I thought. So I have some notes here that we're gonna go. I'll go over, and then there's also other things as well um, that I have here on my computer in front of me. But we'll see how long it goes and how long it gets discussed. Um, but yeah, so I'm going to just go over some 2S LGBTQIA plus history in Canada. So before Canada was even a country, as most people know, well, I mean, there was the Lower Canada, or sorry, I'm not going to
Yeah,
use
we
those.
were the colony of Canada.
Yeah, we were the colony of Canada, and we were greatly influenced and swayed by the Great Britain. And back then, it was considered an abominable act of buggery or sodomy, and it was punishable by death. Until 1861, actually, let me just. It was mostly about like gay men. A lot of the times, women living alone or two women living together were considered like they didn't even consider women to have. Again, I don't know what words to use right now, but they didn't consider women would be able to have like a sexuality, I guess. So most of the early laws and all that were mostly targeted by men. Um, I actually didn't find a lot about. I didn't specifically look, but I didn't find a lot specifically about trans. But I do know for the longest time it was just lumped all together, as in like one type of mental illness. But anyways, in 1861, they actually had changed the laws to if you were caught doing the abominable act of buggery, you'd get 10 years to life in prison, which I guess is better, kind of, than
Kind of.
than the punishable by unaliving. Sorry, I should have wrote down unaliving. Anyways, and like I said, it targeted mostly men who would either be together or whatever. Um, so I'm just going to go to more notes. And then in 1890 in Canada, or what was Canada at the time, homosexuality was considered a gross indecency. So changing the words still kind of means the same thing, but a little bit better than a abominable act of buggery, I guess. Um, so that
It's the lesser of two evils, I guess.
yeah, the lesser of two evils. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like, I mean, just like I mean, I'm not like a language expert or whatever, but I mean, it's kind of interesting to like just look into, well, for me anyways, to look in the terms and how they progress, because it kind of also shows the progression of um, acceptance. Though, well, I mean, I can't really call it acceptance back then, but I mean, the less considering it less evil than before, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, so up until really 1948, that's what it was considered, the gross indecency. But 1948 and 1961 saw big jumps in, um, again, not acceptance, but just viewing the way queer people were. And there were created two different categories. One was called criminal sexual psychopath, and the other one was dangerous. Again, I don't know if I should say this. Anyways, another term which I won't say because again I don't know how TikTok will like it. But those were both considered like psychiatric categories.
Health conditions.
Yeah, of course not treatable unless you were in jail or some sort of like asylum or something. It was,
Well,
anyways.
they thought it was treatable. They used conversion therapy methods that which have been proven not to work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess like for me, I don't think that is a treatment, even though I guess I should really. But yeah,
Yeah,
yep,
but at that
you're
point in
absolutely right.
time, that's what they thought was treatment,
Yeah.
right?
Mm. And actually, it's funny, when I was writing this, I don't know if you ever saw the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I studied
Yes.
it in, I don't remember what level, grade level or university. But I remember that was really the first time in a movie that I saw how they portrayed, not how they portrayed queer people or like gay men, but just like, and they didn't come out and say it too. There were several characters in the asylum under Nurse Ratchet. She was like the main protagonist, no, antagonist. I'm getting mixed up with my words. She was the bad guy in the movie. Anyways, there were several men in there that were obviously there for being queer. And that was really the first time that I saw that. And, you know, it was interesting. I mean, though the movie is a work of fiction, you know, that happened like in asylums and mental wards and all that. There was a lot of people in there for being queer. But yeah, so I'll just continue. Yeah, so it was those two categories were placed on people for any gay person that wasn't celibate. They were all considered a criminal if they weren't celibate. So if you were like gay or queer or lesbian, etc., you just weren't. You were supposed to just be
Not
celibate.
have intimacy
Yeah,
whatsoever.
exactly, because the act of the intimacy was considered the criminal part, not identifying as that necessarily. Then things started to change a little bit. There was a guy named Everett George Kilpert, and he was arrested in 1965 and was given a very harsh sentence for the time. And it got a lot of bad press. A lot of media really, I guess, had a sympathetic side to it for Everett and put a lot of bad press out about it. And it was slowly showing the change of attitudes of the time. And in 1967, 1957, there had been a public inquiry into, I'll just call it queerness. But it took them almost like a decade to actually recognize the public inquiry and the recommendations that were made by it, and led by our former Prime Minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. I think he was he wasn't Prime Minister actually then. I think he was the Minister of, I don't know the term right now. It's but like the legal minister. Anyways, he passed a law decriminalizing gay sex in 1969 with Bill C-150. All right. So from there, things got better. Better. I'm using that word loosely because, I mean, it was still like people were still, getting disowned by their family and stuff like that. But I guess generally, from like a legal point of view, it was getting better. Like after what happened in New York City with the Stonewall Inn, that really sparked the movement for gay rights in Canada. It got a lot of momentum. The first protests in Canada for, I guess we could say, gay rights, one was in Vancouver, one was in Ottawa in 1971. And Toronto had its first Pride celebration in 1972. From there, in 1977, there was an amendment for the Human Rights Code, and it prohibited discrimination of sexual orientation. And it ended a ban on gay immigrants as well, because there was a ban of, I guess, I don't know if you were openly gay, you weren't allowed in, because I don't know really, how they detected that, I mean, I guess, yeah, anyways. So again, I'm skipping a lot here because there's tons and tons of information, and I just didn't want to because it covers so many different stories and aspects.
And we can always delve more into the specific stories in later lives.
Yeah, exactly.
If people are interested.
Yeah, for sure. Now, in 1981, that was when I guess you can consider the Toronto version of the Stonewall Inn, where police arrested about 300 men. There were raids on clubs and bathhouses. And that night, about 3,000 people marched on police stations in that area and went to Queen's Park too, I think. Queen's Park, if I got that name right. Anyways.
Yeah, I believe so.
They marched. I can't read my own writing sometimes. And then it was in 1982 when finally Canada got our own constitution, and there was a Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which laid the foundation for future equality decisions. So that was a big step forth, because if it wasn't for Canada, I guess, bringing home the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it would have been a lot steeper climb for queer rights in Canada. But even though all this progress was happening on that side of things, it was up until 2002 when the police really stopped harassing queer communities in large cities. They would constantly raid queer spaces and just arrest people for whatever, for just even being associated with the scene, I guess. It was not until 1988 when Canada got their first when there was the first openly gay MP in the federal government, Sven Robinson. He was part of the NDP. It was in 1990 when Montreal had its first kind of Stonewall Inn movement, where police raided a gay club. That was in mid-July. And that's actually a lot of people like wonder why Montreal has their pride later on. Well, first of all, in June in Quebec we have Saint Jean de Baptiste, and then on one weekend, and the weekend right after is Canada Day. So there's really not much room to have pride there. But also, like I said, like in Montreal, our version of Stonewall Inn happened in late July. So they just pushed back pride celebrations, and Montreal is like the city of festivals, so it just fit in best in like the first or second week of August. Um, Whatever. What else? I'm just going through this too. If you have questions too, you could go ahead and ask. I didn't.
Nope, I'm okay. I'm taking notes.
Oh. um, yeah, and it wasn't until the year 2000, April 2000, when gay couples were actually allotted federally, anyways, the same rights as common law partners.
Common law couples.
Yeah. And it was in January 2002 in Northwest Territories, which I find really interesting. It was the first place in Canada to include gender identity into their human rights code of conducts. Which I wanted to add that because I think I know sexuality and gender identity are things, but they are important because, well, I mean, even
Yeah.
like, yeah. Anyways, so what else? So in June of 2003, the first same-sex couple got married in Ontario. And then, not finally, it's my last note here. In July 2005, Canada became the fourth country in the world to legalize same-sex equality or marriage equality. Now, just want to add to that the fight really, it really started in 2002, where several provincial upper courts made challenge to the Constitution about gay marriage, and that's really started the ball rolling, and that's what really led to, I think it was like three major provinces like Quebec, Ontario, and British Columbia, who challenged it, and finally, like I said, in 2005, we got marriage equality, which I'm very happy about, even though I've never been married. It just, when that happened to me, was very, I guess, kind of surreal because, like, even though I was still young in the 80s and 90s, it's still like, it just felt like it was going to be like decades away for me.
Yeah, I remember being in school when the legislation was passed, and I had a queer teacher, and she was so happy about it, and she like we followed it all the way through, and just seeing like her almost relax when it finally was passed, and how happy she was that she could finally marry her wife
Mm.
was phenomenal. And I was lucky enough that being raised by my mom, mainly as a single parent, she's very open. She's a member of the LGBTQIA as well.
Mhm.
And I was raised around a lot more people that were trans, that were lesbians, that were gay, or were just drag queens, than I guess majority of my peers. So I was more accepting to it in school than others because a bunch of kids made fun of it, going like, "Why is it a big deal?"
Mm.
But it was a huge deal. It was one of the biggest steps for the LGBTQIA community having equal representation and equal rights to basically live who they love.
Mm. Yeah. Like when I was in high school, there was no one out, and there was no like GSA, like Gay Straight Alliances, no representation. Of course, like there were like teachers that kids would always like, you know, gossip about, like, oh, so and so, Mister So and so is obviously gay, and stuff like that. But there was that was all like negative talk. There was absolutely no
Yeah.
positive talk, and absolutely no talk about it in any of our sex ed courses. Um, I remember that anytime we had sex ed, the teachers were always like, the best way to be is abstinent. Abstinent. Even if I'm going to teach you how to use a condom, be abstinent. You know, and that was like, I found that was so like, well, now, back then I didn't know better, but, you know, like it was just so,
It
I
was
don't know.
more anti. It did not work. The whole just be celibate doesn't work, and it tends to encourage children to go out of their way to do the other thing.
Yeah. And I mean, like,
Statistically shown.
yeah. And I mean, like, it is part of our nature, um, like as human beings. And if, like, adults have a hard time trying to watch my words here. So if adults have a difficult time suppressing those urges, like what do they think is going to happen with teenagers?
Yeah, when you're all full of hormones and all sorts of places.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, it just makes sense to have. This is a topic for another day too, but it just makes sense to have sex ed in schools, age appropriate, of course,
Yeah,
and include 2S LGBTQIA, because like
and
just like denying that they exist doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the child or the teen that identifies or does not sure what they identify yet, and it doesn't help the people who are cis and hetero, because it just makes divisions and makes, and ignorance just grows to hate, and then hate just grows to, well, worse things. People like
and
Daniel Smith.
it also fuels an unrealistic bias
Yeah,
that everybody is supposed to be heteronormative.
yeah, exactly. And like I remember, like in one of my psychology courses that I took, it was about sexuality, and like you know how they have the bell curve, and like this
Yeah.
end and this end, the two small parts. So this end and this end, like this, let's say this is straight. It's like small amount of people
Sorry.
are 100% straight, and a small amount of people are 100% gay, and everyone else is in the middle, and everyone else is on like this the bi spectrum, to a point. So, and like I know of a lot of men, gay men and bi men, who you know, they got married, had children, and they came out in their 50s and 60s, and you know what, like they've confided in me, like they, you know, they were miserable most of their life, and when they came out it was like, I don't know, paradise opening up to them on earth or something. It was yeah. So I mean, like even if you identify as straight as a teenager, it's, you know, it could be because you're suppressing, and then later on, anyways, that's a topic for another day. I don't want to get into that right now, um, unless you want to. I mean, we certainly can.
Probably best for another day.
That's for another day. Yeah.
It'll be a whole way to, piss off right extremists.
Yeah. So we have a lot of time left. I thought like maybe we could open it up to people who have questions. They can ask questions in the comments, or if they want to come up, they can certainly come up and discuss with us. Um, so, I
Or
mean,
even if you guys want to share something that you may have experienced in your own life with
yeah,
either yourself being part of the 2S LGBTQIA community or someone you know and care about.
yeah, yeah. Because I'm pretty sure most people have had some sort of connection to either someone they know or a loved one, etc. Um, oh, There's Mrs. It's coming up. Hello.
Hi, thank you for bringing me up into the box.
Well, thank you for watching.
Just gonna turn my volume up. Still dealing with a bit of a cold here, but thank you so much for doing the show. Great job, you guys.
Oh, well,
Great
thank you.
job.
Oh,
Yes, Marshy.
Here's
House.
the whole crew. The whole crew's up.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for doing this. I appreciate it. I'm actually going to show it to my nephew who is trans
Oh,
and give him a voice because he needs it. He lives in Alberta as well. And I
yeah.
don't
Yeah,
think Danielle understands the depravity and the level of harm she's causing to people. And I just want to say thank you for being brave enough to talk about this because I think everybody needs to sit down and collectively understand what science is. And it's not a phase, it's not a choice, it's who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And by pushing the heteronormative agenda is what they're pushing in schools for sexual education, I'm not okay with.
Hmm. Yeah. And
and
even, sorry, go on.
especially too right now with the climate of other places in the world, specifically our neighbors in the States, with how much they're targeting trans, and the fact that
Yeah,
Canada is following suit is terrifying. It's hard enough being transgender uh, without the legislation because of prejudice and discrimination against people who are transgender, and them thinking that it's not a real thing. There are multiple studies that they've done where it shows that someone who's transmasculine, their brain functions, and you can see it in a CT or MRI,
yeah.
functions the exact same way as a cisgendered man's would. Same goes for trans femme and a
Right.
cisgendered woman.
I,
It
and I, and I,
is
go ahead.
it's a disconnect between the brain developing and the chromosomal adaptations that we get
Right.
during utero. So our
Yeah,
brain develops as if we have, the, say, XY chromosome, but the rest of our body presents with the double X.
right. And isn't it like called a hormone wash in utero?
Uh, I can't remember the exact term for it,
Because
but it
that's what I've heard, and I'm like talking with other people in your guys' community. Um, I hope I got your pronouns right. You are he, him.
yeah, he, him, or he, they,
Actually,
Which
because
one?
sorry, that's a good point. We next show we should start by telling people our pronouns as well.
yeah, that's probably a good idea. I don't know. I've gotten to the point with being out as long as I have, and with coming out as many times as, what do I look like? Do I look like a he, or do I look like I don't necessarily have a gender? Go with that.
You look like a human being that deserves love and affection and everything else under the
Yeah.
sun.
Yeah.
Or my favorite thing is when people ask me my pronouns is you can call me by my name.
I don't give people a chance for my name. I'm like, you can call me she, you can call me her, or you can call me the next problem. Because I will be the problem, the entire problem.
Have you guys
Yeah.
have you guys seen his name is Romanus? He's out of Calgary, and he did a video where he went to school with Tiny Trump. You know who I referred to Tiny Trump as Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah.
I call him Tiny Trump,
Yeah.
right? So
You
he
mean
went.
Millhouse the paper boy?
Yeah, so he went to school with him, and there's a picture of him standing beside Tiny Trump in the hockey uniforms. They were in hockey together, and he said one day they were in the hockey, in the dressing room, and it was announced that Jeff was to be called Pierre moving forward,
Yeah,
and
his name is not even
no
his name.
longer wanted to be called by his dead name. Now, they never referred to it that way, but isn't it interesting when it comes
Okay.
to these gender affirming care conversations that the very people who are setting up policy legislation, et cetera,
Well,
uh,
That's the same as Marlena
Hang on,
Smith
Sparky, hang
too.
on. That are, anti LGBTQ, anti trans, are people who've engaged in the very thing. And, and of course, with Tiny Trump, his father identifies as a gay man. And so it is hypocritical, and it is part of how difficult it is to understand where all this hate is coming from when they themselves have personally engaged.
Right. And not to mention, Danielle Smith is actually not Danielle Smith. It's Marlena Danielle Smith.
Yeah,
Is another example.
yeah, exactly.
But go
So
ahead.
I don't call her or address her as Danielle Smith. When I'm going to write a letter to her, what I will do is call her Marlena. And if she does not like it, I'll like, that's your given name. You
Mm,
should not be going by your new name if you don't want other people to use their not given name.
yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
you can't have one for thee. It can't be yes for me and no for thee. Like that's just not gonna work. I'm sorry.
You
Oh,
know,
I'm writing her a letter.
yeah, I find the whole conversation about gender affirming care one of the most, I don't want to say easy, but it accommodates people being able to start normalizing their ill feeling, or start unpacking their ill feelings from a place that's not too dramatic of a impact. Like gender affirming care, when you think of it in terms of the trans person's journey, is quite different than because I myself have engaged in gender affirming care. I had breast reduction when I was in my 30s, and never was that questioned when I was just trying to be more acceptable according to what would my gendered cisgendered label, let's say, right? But those conversations never really came into my head. And so if people can start saying, replace, like Elon Musk, getting hair replacement for gender affirming care as a male. A lot of men will have breast reductions as well. If you come in from that angle, it just opens a broader door to understanding that this is not this culture war piece, but that there is this broader lens that if you start looking through it that way, maybe you can be more accepting about how it happens on the other layers levels.
And
Okay.
a big reason why people don't question that, though, is because you're cisgender and you're affirming the gender that was identified at birth. It's more socially acceptable.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had explained to someone on a panel because everyone's like, we know you got this. We know that you're not gonna talk about anything you don't know about. And I'm like, well, no, because it's not how I identify with. So I wouldn't talk on, you know, it's like an apple not talking about how it's being orange. They wouldn't know, right? It's two
Yeah.
different things. And I was asking this person, I'm like, do you get haircuts? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, that's gender affirming care. You get your nails done?
Mm,
Well, no, I'm a man. I'm like, okay, well, you can get pedicures and you can get, manicures done even if you're a man or a woman.
yeah.
And he's like, well, yeah, I get my pedicures. I'm like, okay, that's gender affirming care. Do you get waxed or do you shave? Yep, that's gender affirming care. Like
Hmm.
all these things that you do as a cishet male is what is what you do
Hmm.
to affirm your gender.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with you getting pedicures. I'm not calling you a sissy or anything. What I'm saying is you cannot do this for you, but not allow someone else to do it because that's hypocrisy. Oh, this man went off and had a crash out. It
Botox
was
and
horrible.
boob jobs could also be considered gender affirming
No, they
care.
are actually. I talked to a doctor.
Yeah.
Yep.
I asked my doctor because I was curious about getting. They wanted me to do Botox, and I wasn't going to do it. And I said, "Is that gender affirming care?" And she goes, "Absolutely."
It,
Like the
uh,
level of crash outs that I've had from people talking about gender affirming care and giving them an idea, a rough estimate of what is considered, like
yeah.
5 minutes and they crash out.
I know myself, like I've had my hysterectomy done and my ovarectomy, so I had my uterus and my ovaries removed, and that's been great as long as I don't forget to take my testosterone, because otherwise I get shot into menopause.
Ooh.
That interesting.
And
I also have
the
lost my
moose,
ovaries in my his. I had the same surgeries, and I got the. I had the experience of going on testosterone. Holy fuck, man! Is that ever a powerful substance? And yeah, I wanted to throw the remote across the room if I couldn't get the channel change. It was
yep,
very, very powerful stimulant, and nobody even, again, it wasn't questioned that I needed gender affirming care. I had to get progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone, all three things, and never once did the conversation have the lens of gender affirming care attached to it. Never.
Poor Sean is trying to hide a cat's butt.
Sorry, I didn't want her butt on.
No, but no cat
uh,
butthole.
the moose had his hand up in the
Oh,
comments.
sorry. Go ahead, Moose. I
No, it's
can't.
okay. I've been loving the conversation. First and foremost, I wanted to say welcome, and I'm so happy that both of you have become a part of the Beaver crew. So welcome, and I love the background. Um, Great job bringing the history, Canadian history, especially fantastic. And I just want to add a little bit for context for people too. In very recent history, there was a big move that was done in January of 2022 with Bill C4 that banned conversion therapy finally in Canada. So something that is so recent in history that really has been pushing to move things in the opposite direction that we want to see finally, got abolished for lack of better words and can move forward better.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. I had meant to say that like 2S LGBTQ history in Canada doesn't end with the marriage equality. There's so many
No.
other things that so many laws, so many other landmark like rulings and stuff like that has occurred. Specifically with trans, I didn't necessarily leave trans out on purpose. I wanted to give more space to Pasty to speak more about trans stuff. Not because, like, obviously I accept Pasty. I just wanted Pasty to have more of the floor about that subject since I'm cis.
There is one more thing I want to add about that bill that made it illegal for conversion therapy. The entirety of the Conservative Party, including Pierre Poilievre, voted to keep conversion therapy
Yeah,
legal in
absolutely.
Canada.
Yeah, that's true.
It's telling. It's telling.
I,
Yeah,
I,
I have a question for Pasty. Okay, so our healthcare is provincial. Would you say it's sort of like, I mean, I'm talking ideology here, but do you think that the provinces kind of got it together before the feds on terms of supporting LGBTQ2S plus or the trans issues specifically? Because in order for you to get that kind of care in our healthcare system, there had to be something policy related or legislatively related that was accepting of this level of gender affirming care. So I guess it's the chicken or the egg. Which do you think brought that along? Like, did you
Well,
notice when that was happening to you even?
I'm
Honestly, I
wearing
believe it's a mix of both.
I'm wearing a shirt
Um,
that says oh, sorry, I'll let you
uh, because there were a lot of things that the federal government put in place to allow the provinces to put gender affirming care under what would be covered by provincial health cares.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was up to the provinces if they adopted it or not.
So, is there anything sort of specific in the charter that way,
Uh,
or is it like do
I'd
they
ha- I,
follow the generality of the charter to then motivate what happens on the provincial level, which I guess that makes sense now that I'm saying it out loud. But I was kind of hoping there was something very, very specific in language in our healthcare,
No, because
something at the federal.
even here in Ontario, they tend to bounce back and forth a lot, whether or not the Ministry of Health will cover my testosterone or if I have to pay for it out of pocket.
Uh-huh.
Um, Same with surgeries. There's only, I think, 150 surgeries in Ontario that are accepted per year for gender affirming surgeries.
Why 150? Where'd the magic number come from? Poof.
I don't know. But so if you're not within that bracket of people, if you don't get your applications in early enough to OHIP, you
Wow.
don't get your surgeries done. There's also a set time frame when you can apply for OHIP coverage in Ontario for your gender affirming surgeries. There's also surgeons that won't accept OHIP only for your surgeries. Like if I have to go to Montreal to get my surgery done to remove my chest, my double bilateral mastectomy, so in order for it to be covered fully. Otherwise, I'd be paying $6,000 out of pocket here in
Ooh.
Ontario.
Wow.
Um, there's a shirt I'm wearing. It says "Equal rights for all" doesn't mean fewer rights for you. It's not pie. Someone asked me what that meant, and I'm like, if you don't know what that means, I can't help you. God can't help you. Jesus can't even help you.
Yeah.
Because if you don't believe in equal rights for all, mind you, I live in the middle of like Alberta in the Bible Belt.
I feel so bad for you.
I'm I'm okay. I'm in Cypress Hills, Alberta. If you know where that is, look up Cypress Hills. I live right in front of a church, and like just down the street, there's another church, and on the other side of the like road, going on the opposite direction, is three other churches. Yes,
That's
I
a
live in the.
that's a great segue for maybe a new piece that I haven't heard this morning. But have you, you haven't talked about your spiritual journey around, um, the queer issues. Let's just say for a general term, and has churches impacted that and because some churches are very accepting and warm and welcoming, right? And have you found your space and your? I hope so. But anyway, I'd be curious to hear some reflections from you guys on that. And thanks, Marshy, for bringing that to the table.
Yeah, just going to put a pin in that. We will get. I just want to again remind everyone that tapping is clapping. The more you tap, the higher chance we get to go into the FYP. Also, sharing is caring. And if you want to see other Beaver Politics shows, just click on our icon at the top, and you could view what other shows that we have all during the week. Anyway, sorry.
I believe there's a different one every day.
Yes, there's a different one every day. Sometimes there's two a day, with all great, lovely, progressive people who care about Canada and care about people. Anyways,
How dare we have humanity?
care about humanity, yes, and the planet too. Because I mean, like, yes, we care about other human beings, but we also care that the planet stays healthy, so humanity can continue on living. Anyway, so yeah, religious aspect of being clear on that. Do you want to lead that off, Pacey?
Sure. I'm gonna start it off with I've got a lot of religious trauma because my dad's side is very much Christian. The church that they were part of was referred to by a lot of other Christians within the town that we lived in as a cult. Um, Now I have more of a spiritual connection towards paganism and the Red Path, so traditional niche ways of life and teachings.
Yes.
because my mom's been working really hard to get us back to community and back in touch with our culture since I was about 9. Because my great grandmother was, we believe, to be a uh, victim of the 60s scoop. We know that she's First Nations, but we can't find any documents tying her to her community.
Hmm.
And on my dad's side, I'm First Nations as well from Robinson Huron Treaty.
Oh,
But we never talked about it. It was something that was very much an
hush
iffy
hush.
part. It was a shameful part of our family history because he was adopted by his white mother's parents in order to save him from being sent to residential school.
What a story.
For
Story.
I I avoid Christianity and Catholicism though for the most part because majority of the people, there are some very accepting and I love the ones that are accepting. They're wonderful. Um, but there's quite a few that use it as a point to be able to be a bigot
yeah,
Mm.
and to
Um,
spread hatred. There's hatred and I'm not okay with that.
as an Indigenous woman, I feel that trauma on a whole different level, like on a level that you would understand, because that red path that we're walking,
I'm
it's not
trying to
easy.
find again.
It's not easy because again, you being in the LGBT, the 2S LGBTQIA plus, I I can only sympathize with you. I can't empathize because I don't know. I can show empathy and sympathy, but you're rocking it, man. You're gonna do it.
Thanks.
You're gonna get there.
Well, I'm a boomer, and growing up with our family members that my uncles and a few uncles who were gay, and the way they had to hide themselves, and the my one uncle had a relationship. I lived in New Brunswick. I grew up in New Brunswick, and would have to travel all the way to Montreal to have their relationships, right? And I just thought how, and my family were like, oh well, we were okay with him doing that, like we supported his gayness because we were okay with him going to Montreal, and I'm like, he wasn't allowed to live his truth in his own life day to day. He had to travel 1,000 miles in order just to go have some intimacy. And you guys thought that was support. Like
Yeah.
the way the conversation was not managed, I should say, very well. You know, yeah, I think back now. I remember I grew up very Catholic, and I went into a born again experience, and then I became a Jehovah's Witness. So I have quite a religious deconstruction story in my past as well. And one of the big things that took me away from Christianity was the issue with the United Church and turning against LGBTQ members. And it was a big division in the church. And I'm taking you back now to 1981. I was living this experience and making a decision about churches and not even knowing how important this issue had become to me as somebody who early on in my life would pick up the plight of those who were oppressed around me, not knowing how to define it. But early in my days, I seen the oppression on the people who identified as gay in my family, and I seen that within the church system I was in, and I walked away from those entities because of these things, but not knowing how to define them. I am so grateful for today's for shows like this, for the way people have given words and voice to the problem, like being able to just discuss it on an intellectual level is that's leaps and bounds in my lifetime. In my lifetime, some people, when you grow up and you're 20 to 30 years old, and this conversation's been on the table since you started, what a privilege that is in terms of how you can either be part of, ending the oppression or having a more comfortable journey. Not to take away from anybody's uncomfortable journey, it's still an oppressive bullshit situation out there, but we have made some steps, is what I'm trying to say. There has been some small, minute steps, and the churches had such a big piece in how our legislation and policy got developed. And people need to stop and have a look at that and see how they support their church in the oppression of how that plays out for the 2S LGBTQ community, right?
Yeah.
I'm babbling. I'm sorry. I'm feeling like your stories have touched 1,000 stories in me today for some reason.
Well, that's good.
All flooding. All
That's
flooding.
good. I also know, like, there's been, like, we were doing really good with movements towards progression for when it comes to S LGBTQ rights from about 2014 till about 2019. Then it started to fall back off, and
Okay.
people started demonizing it again. Because, like, I remember being in high school when I first came out, and I was one of the first openly trans kids that the school board in my region had ever had. Uh, and I went to one school specifically, which was a performing arts school. They were wonderful about it, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
And to all of my to every single teacher in the school, sent an email stating that I was transgender, that these were my preferred pronouns, and sent an article that I really like that I've read a bunch of times, and it's called Trans 101. And it's to help teachers and people in settings where they're going to have to do things to either help or support people that are trans. It gives this amazing outline on how to go about it.
Yeah.
Right.
So I
But
sorry, go on.
oh, sorry, but I've also had the really bad side of it where I was shunned from a school and I was jumped in a bathroom after I came out. It was absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
Because up north too, everything's like 10 years behind the rest of freaking Canada.
Well, and violence is such a more acceptable response in some, let's say, the rural, remote areas of the world, right? There's no police force around them that's going to hold them accountable, even within the community, right? So, it can be, I know I'm from rural, remote north as well, and yeah, what I've witnessed is it's atrocious. Yeah, and today's political climate, when I think about it, because I was doing a bunch of, work with, there's a group in our community called Positive Living North, and they work with HIV, AIDS, and they do a lot of advocacy for the LGBTQ community. And I think our community in general looks to them to kind of see and sees them as spearheading that. But as HIV rates dropped, as that issue became more and more in control, I wonder if that's a reflection, maybe has an impact on why the decline towards LGBTQ, because their advocacy wasn't front and center in quite the same way. And those advocacy voices are control mechanisms in our communities, right? They are the ones that kind of, like, we wonder, where did all these people crawl out from under their rocks from? They've had these value systems and these thoughts, but they knew not to speak of them, right? And now they have permission, and now they have this space that has been emboldened through our politicians, but also through the devaluing of our nonprofit systems and our advocacy voices in that world. And the more we have conservative healthcare control provincially, the less of those voices that are out there now. I bet there's a direct correlation between those two things happening.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I just wanted to mention it because you brought up religion. So the youth center that I worked for was actually set up by a United Church,
Okay.
and it was run by them. But so dropped. Okay. Well, if she comes back,
This was in the early '80s, and I know the United Church has morphed in ways that are quite interesting politically, because I believe if you were to go on the United Church's website, I think I did this for a TikTok, talking about how churches are actually like the way they used to have Bible studies to create disciples to go spread the message of the Lord. They're actually having little mini democracy meetings where they're training church members how to get involved at school district level, at the city council level, how to be more political as an MLA and MP and stuff like that. And they're actually doing this training the same way they train for Bible studies and stuff. And I believe it was the United Church's website that actually has an entire page dedicated to how they do this. And I thought, how do they get tax-free status when they are overtly involving themselves at a political level like this, right?
yeah.
That's a little off topic, but United Church has had an interesting morphing in our Canadian. But I remember at that time, at that church, and it was a church on Vancouver Island, and it may have been me at 19 not recognizing that this was something happening at a local level between a church, and the congregations may have been splitting as opposed to a nationwide movement within the United Church.
Yeah.
However, I know that nationwide movement has happened. I'm not up to date on it yet. That's all. Not up to date on it.
Well, for me, I should make some contents. Like right now, like for religiously, I'm, depending on the day, I say I'm agnostic or I'm atheist.
Right.
I think that does have a lot to do with me being gay or queer.
Mm-hmm.
I used to go to the go to church when I was younger. And I don't know, I guess when I started realizing that I was different and gay, there was so many messages from religious people, religious leaders in general, and so many stories that just really turned me off of religion.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been personally told by even people who I worked with, like, you're going to hell, right? Like, aren't you worried? In fact, actually, one time at work, one guy came up to me. He was, I don't know what denomination. I don't want to say, I don't even know. I know they're ones that believe in the rapture, for sure. Because he said to me that, don't worry, Sean, you're a great guy. When the rapture comes, I'll be your savior. And it was really awkward because, like, what do you say to that? Thanks? Thanks that you're, like, saving me from hell? I don't know.
Yeah.
To be completely honest, my response would have been just, ew.
I'm going to tell a story I've never told here on TikTok before, because I was in the cult of the Jehovah's Witness. And even though I had all these, this understanding of LGBTQ not being a bad thing, in that religion it was. And it was so to the point that it governed your sexual activity in your bedroom with your husband or partner. And we were not allowed to engage in oral sex because that was a defilement of the marriage bed, because it was a homosexual act. Okay? So that was the rule.
Including sodomy laws?
Correct. Right? So that was a rule. And I was young and I was a thriving member of the JW community. I spoke at meetings. I had door-to-door work. I did 160 hours a month door-to-door work. I had Bible studies. I did conversations in front of 5,000 people at conventions. I had a major role. I would guest speak at different community churches in the north. It's all in the north, but not to overstate it. But nonetheless, I had presence in the Jehovah's Witness community. Now, my husband was not a baptized witness. I was baptized, and I engaged in those activities with him, and he reported me. He reported me to the church. And at 20, I was 21 or 22 when this happened. No, maybe I was 22, 23 when this happened. I'd already been involved for about 3 or 4 years.
Not this husband, different husband.
Anyways, I had to go in front of a committee of there was 4 old white guys and explain why I was doing this. And they wanted detail. In my looking back at that was a sexual abuse and how the situation of a young girl. And here I am, and they punished me. I was no longer allowed to go door to door. I was no longer allowed to answer questions at meetings. I was no longer spiritually strong enough to guide a Bible study. And everybody in all those 4 communities knew that I had been punished. The humiliation was fucking huge. What a time it took for me to overcome that thing. And it was all related to their, their hate of that community. Anyway, okay, there's my story. Thank you for letting me share.
Well, thank you for sharing. It's. I don't want to get into it, but I guess I don't know. Well, okay. Well, I'll say this. So, I went the United Church I went to when I was younger. I had actually, after I had come out and became a little bit more confident in myself, I actually had asked Sister, would he perform gay marriages? This was after 2005. I don't remember exactly when. And he said he would, just not at that church, because that congregation has voted against affirmation. And that kind of really also I don't know. I kind of was, even though he said he would, I was kind of angry at him. Isn't it his? Congregation. It's democratic, and it's the minister isn't. But I kind of felt like he should have stood up more. I don't know.
That's the minister's job, is to stand up against something that they say is something that may not be right, even though the congregation is opposed to it. If affirming is the right way to go to make sure everybody is equal, it is the minister's job to push for it to be approved and to continuously bring it up, not just leave it alone.
And the United Church that set up the youth center, the LGBT youth center, the minister there, he was gay himself, and obviously the congregation was affirming. So it was two different, both under the same denomination, but 2 different views towards marriage equality, and it was But I don't know myself necessarily have a lot of, well, I don't know, I guess not direct religious trauma, because I was never really, besides people of being religious sometimes telling me that, oh, you're going to go to hell, etc. I don't have any, I would say, horrible experiences. I think a lot of the horrible things I've heard from people kind of indirectly traumatized me in a way.
Secondhand trauma.
Yeah. I have a friend who was actually tied up in his basement for, I don't know, for 2 or 3 days, because he was caught. I don't know. I think he said he was 14, whatever, and his best friend kissed him, and he was tied up for a couple of days in the basement. To what word did he use? Purge the devil from him.
Yep.
And when he told me that, I was but because now the thing is that his parents now are accepting. It's just I'm glad people grow and all that, and sometimes it does take parents having a clear child to open up. But it just, to me, it's still that type of punishment is, I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for him. He loves his parents. I don't know if I would be able to forgive for that, but then again,
It's trauma, right? It's trauma. And, you know, the word lateral violence comes into play here because of what you had to learn, absorb, and move forward with and accommodate because you did not want that to happen to you.
yeah, no.
You know, at some level, you would have had those defensive, self-defense thoughts.
And even with being out, there's moments where you have to critically think of, is this something I'm going to share with someone? Are they a safe person to share it with? Or am I going to end up in danger if I do?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Always.
It's a very real reality.
Yeah. Actually, a good
Which
movie,
sucks.
a movie recommendation that it's an old movie now, I guess, about like conversion therapy is what is it called? Oops, I thought it was no, but I'm a cheerleader. There, that's what it's called. But I'm a cheerleader. It's kind of it's kind of lighthearted take towards conversion therapy, but it has some very good themes and makes some good points about it, and also highlights kind of how a lot of youth were told that they were gay or lesbian or queer even before they realized it for themselves. And that is actually a very interesting topic because I myself was coined as being gay as young as 12 by bullies. And I didn't know until like I was 14, 15. So, you know, anyways, but that movie is a really good movie.
Experience with being trans. People coined me as being trans way before I ever came out.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing.
Interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, I can see that. I know my son is a cis white man. However, because of our lifestyle, he's a hippie, and in the arts, and he's theater driven, and he's a performer. He's a comedian. He's been in documentaries. He's been in many plays. He does burlesque. But he was identified in the LGBTQ2S plus community within our family, and that led to some troubles. Right, that led to some troubles, unfortunately. But we never corrected them. You think what you want to think, and we celebrated if that's what you think, and it depowered them. Right, it disempowered them with the whole. That's how we managed the conversation. But I think about all these underlying, how much of it we all think, all right, LGBT, the amount of population that's actually directly affected is what, 5-6%? So 5-6% of the people in your lives, just for, you know, demographic ratio, and yet we have all these values that are centered around that 5 or 6%, right? Like, to say that a small group of people doesn't make a large impact, that's not true. And that small group is same with Indigenous people in Canada. They represent. I know I'm from northern British Columbia, right? I asked my brother, oil and gas guy, one time, how many Indigenous people are there in British Columbia? And he thought there was about 70% of the population was Indigenous because that's what it was around him. And they can't think outside of the bigger scope of what that really looks like. But that small amount of people had that large voice impact. And I see the same with the LGBTQ2S plus community as well, that the voice is getting louder and louder and louder to the point that we all have these mainstream experiences, even though the population only exists at a level of 5 to 6% in our lives.
And
Interesting.
I just want to make an interesting observation. I find that there's always people saying, you know, Stonewall was started by a BIPOC trans person. But I mean, just in general, the ones that I find standing up mostly for our community are Indigenous, BIPOC, not just trans, but just people in general. They're the ones who I find that I look up to. I find they have gone through so much. Intersectionality is a real thing, and they experience discrimination on a whole different level than me, being a cis white man. But the strength that they have to persevere through what they've gone through and still lead a community is amazing. Like,
And in most First Nations cultures and languages, there's no gendered terms. It's all gender neutral. They don't have he or she in a lot of languages. They have a word for girl and boy, but there's no pronouns that are associated with it.
How advanced is the society, right? And they try to dismantle all that. I do have to drop away.
okay.
Thank you for letting me come up and enjoy the show.
Thank you for coming up.
There's 11 people still in the room, which is great. If you continue for another half hour, I'm going to probably have you on in the background. I just have some things I have to attend to here. But I'm looking forward to next week's story. Here's a word. Ben writes intersectionality. You said it as I typed. That is I could spend another hour here. As a feminist and studied feminism, intersectionality was a big part of our studies and why I am so passionate about this issue, because it came to me, a lot of the awareness came through my studies of feminism. And I'd love to have that conversation as well. So welcome to the Beaver Politics. But thank you for doing this show. And I'm going to drop out now and you guys continue on and we'll see you in cyberspace soon.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming up.
I'm just going to take this time again just to remind everyone that tapping is clapping and sharing is caring. That's not even a heart. That's more of a heart. Whatever. You get the point. Also, again, if you want to see the other shows that are hosted by Beaver Politics, just click on our icon above. The first pinned video has a bunch of different shows, but you could also go through all the promos and see what there is, because there's a whole slew of different topics that we cover. Also, I should mention that our opinions doesn't necessarily cover, well, no, that's not what I want to say. Our opinions are our own and isn't necessarily the opinion of Beaver Politics in itself.
Also, if you'd like to join the team, there's a little heart up beside our name and if you press on it, you get notifications about our lives and other posts, which is great. You can also subscribe for under $5 a month.
Yep. And remember, the more popular that Beaver Politics gets, like, our mission is to spread awareness amongst.
We've got a request for someone to come up.
Oh, okay. Let's see who that is. That is Treaty. Okay, here you go.
Hi, Treaty. Six Bird.
Hello.
Hello, thanks for having me up.
Okay.
We have a question.
Yeah.
So, and then this one's for Pasty. We're curious. This is Perry. Perry's my husband, so we've both been listening. We're wondering about, so when trans people are gone through the transition and are, gender affirmed, or I'm not even sure. So please correct me if I don't use the right language and stuff. I'm still learning how all of this to navigate through this.
You're doing very good so far.
Reality. So okay, but please, I'm very open. I need to be corrected if I do misspeak. Okay, but we're curious, if once somebody's transition is complete, do you still identify LGBTQ?
Yes.
Okay.
Because no matter what we do, we're still not male or female, but we are a trans man or a trans woman.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you. That
Change
that
our
helps.
chromosomal makeup.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Thanks. That was the question. I'm still trying to I still struggle, like maybe you guys can help me, and I know my daughter, like the younger generation, um you know, it's just it's a little more clear for them. I'm 56 now. So, not and I just sometimes struggle with the appropriate way to address people, and especially like the they and them. Sometimes my brain doesn't comprehend those pronouns well.
I kind of have a trick for that.
Yeah.
So
Please
when you
share.
don't know the gender of someone, so like if somebody asks you if the male person's come by, have they come by yet?
Yes.
Do you
Yeah,
think
and
of it, like, use it more in that sense?
I do acknowledge that, but I find like my brain struggles still when I know the person or I can picture the person. When it's a
That
stranger, it's easy to say they. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's the the construct that goes with gender within society that
Yeah.
forms the
It's
lapse, if
interesting
you will.
how challenging this is to undo this taught behavior, right? Because we're taught it, right? Like I've been thinking about, I saw someone else do a video about how even from the very beginning we do this to babies, right? Girls wear
Yep.
pink, boys wear blue, and we condition ourselves right from birth, and it makes
Yep.
it really hard to unlearn this stuff. But thank you very much for sharing that and having this space with us, because it's going to help everybody have a greater understanding and respect for all of you and all of us too. So
And a big
appreciate it.
thing too when it comes to interacting with someone who's non-binary or trans femme or trans mask that you're close to, as long as you try and you correct yourself when you make mistakes, they'll appreciate that. I
That's
know also depending on the generation, so millennials are generally more okay with being asked questions about being transgender than I find Gen Z is.
oh, interesting. Okay. Um,
Uh,
because yeah, I was curious.
I've
Like I
even
know it was
faced that among community having issues there.
right. Because I don't know too many Gen Z anyways, but I because I know as an indigenous person, right? Like if somebody doesn't know, we prefer like to ask, right? It's all ask the questions and we'll guide you, or and so
Yep.
I feel like it's the same way, but I you never know if somebody's faced abuse or they're just sick of talking about it sometimes. You know what I mean? Like sometimes we get
Yeah.
sick of correcting people and teaching people, and it's exhausting on your mental health and your energy. So but again, I appreciate, and I'll join these conversations more because I'm continuing to learn and grow.
And I will never put anybody down if they want to ask questions. One of my favorite things to do, specifically when it comes to the trans community, is I'd rather have people ask me questions so I can inform them instead of them just being ignorant
Yeah. And
That's
or living in a state of not willing to learn.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. So, well, thank you for bringing me up. And that was my only question for now. But, now that we're doing this, I'm sure I'll be back. And I'm so glad that you guys joined the Beavers. It's excellent to see you guys here. So, have an awesome rest of your show.
well, thank you. I just wanted to mention too, not a lot of people realize this, and actually at first too, when I came across it, it wasn't. Wouldn't use the word shocked, but it was certainly mind opening experience. So when people are trans, they, like for instance, trans man, they could be gay. For instance, there are trans men who like other men. There's also trans women.
I'm a gay trans man.
Exactly. Yeah. And also there's non-binary people who, as an example, there's a lot more than this, but non-binary people who identify as pansexual. And pansexual doesn't mean that you like pans, by the way. I know a lot of people, oh my God. Anyways, that will be another topic for another show. It just, in general, that means the gender doesn't really matter to them. It's the person. Just, I guess that's the easiest way to explain it to people. But
You look for hearts, not parts.
Right.
I like that.
Oh, perfect. I love that. That's an excellent way to remember. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I like that a lot. Hearts, not parts.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's so funny. I found like people who really struggle with trying to understand or even giving themselves the space to understand is they can't get beyond the parts, right? And the
Yeah.
sexuality. Like it's just like this it's none of your business what the sexuality is. The business that we have as folks that are trying to understand is just getting to know you better.
Mm.
It doesn't matter what you do in your bedrooms, but people can't get beyond that, and that's where I know I've seen the hangups come, right? Like
Or
the
or the
pervert conversation.
Yeah.
or the difference between sexual orientation and gender identity. Not a lot of people recognize that there's the difference between the two.
Mm.
Yeah, you know, the patriarchy has done its damage deep, right? Like
Oh yeah.
this was you there's so much evidence showing that, you know, indigenous cultures around the world have always understood that there's not just man woman. And, you know,
Yeah.
even going back in time like to other non-indigenous, they've also had that understanding and somehow along the
Yeah.
way they got to control everybody.
All throughout ancient histories, there's documentations of there being a masculine, a feminine, and something that's in between or neither.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was um, colonialism, white colonialism, that really brought in the patriarchy for most of the world.
Yeah, I know. How do you know? And it was done in like what 200 years for like in North America and Turtle Island, anyways.
Mm.
So maybe in the next 200 years we can undo it, and hopefully sooner.
Hopefully sooner.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
I agree, but let's be kind and you know what and realistic, because sometimes when we put unrealistic expectations on ourselves, it makes it when the outcomes don't happen, we get disappointed. And I can even speak from an indigenous rights perspective, and when I'm trying so hard to fight and feel like I'm making headway, but then things, you take 5 steps back forward and 3 back. I've learned to just kind of be, give space to that reality, I guess. And
Yeah, I've watched my mom go through that with dealing with Indigenous rights a fair amount of my life because she has worked for multiple different Indigenous organizations and trying to advocate for Native rights within Ottawa or even back home,
oh,
which
that's
is definitely interesting.
I wonder if I know your mom. We'd have, maybe we'll follow up another day, but interesting because
That'd be interesting.
I've been in this field for 28 years, but mostly in Alberta, but I was actually just in Ottawa this week. So that's pretty cool. It's a small world, hey?
Yeah. I know my mom got to go to an amazing conference last month that was in Niagara, I think it was.
Oh,
And it was about
wow.
Indigenous matters.
That's awesome. I wasn't there. I was actually at another conference in Edmonton and one in Regina also. They're like it's our
Wow.
people are definitely busy. But anyways, I won't take up your guys' space. This is your space. So, but I really appreciate getting to know you both better.
Oh, well, thank you for coming up. And if you have
Thank
questions
you for coming
anytime,
up.
Yeah, and Pasty, I do Indigenous Matters on Monday nights, right? So if you want to join the conversation there too, you're always welcome. Where we try to have as much Indigenous conversation in that space.
I know I
So
try to catch your live every week.
okay,
I love it.
awesome. I'm sorry if I don't notice. Like I really struggle with engaging and keeping my eye on the comments. So I oftentimes have no clue who's in the room.
I'm experiencing that now too. Like I'm down.
Yeah, I'm having the same issue.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where have the mods are helpful too.
Yeah.
So and they can help us understand know when somebody wants to come up or there's banter in the comments and stuff. But
Oh, she paused.
oh yeah, I'm sorry, my phone, my tablet's dying. It just gave me the battery notification, so I better plug in.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for having me up. I'm going to step down now so I can get some other stuff going here, but I'm still listening.
All right.
Well, thank you. And if anyone
Thank
else
you for
is
coming.
watching and you want to come up or ask a question, or even if you don't want to come up, you can ask a question in the chat, and we will do our best to answer it. I just want to remind everyone that these opinions are our own and may not necessarily represent all of Beaver politics. And again, clapping, no, tapping.
Tapping is clapping. Tapping is clapping, and sharing is caring.
Yeah. So, no one asking to come up, that's fine. So we can just continue our conversation. I think, I don't know, I have a lot more stories that I can talk about, like my experience being a gay man. Do you have any stories that come to mind that you would like to talk about and share with us?
I can talk about my coming out story with my mother, because that was an interesting experience.
Yeah, sure.
So coming out in any form, well-being to us LGBTQIA, right, is generally very nerve-wracking, right? And just before coming out to my mom, I came out to my father, who kicked me out. My mom had come up home for a visit and told her, and her and my step-parent just kind of do you see this face? Do we look surprised? And they just walked away, didn't talk nothing more. Just, do we look surprised, and walked away. I just kind of stood there for a moment going, what the hell just happened? Or like when I came out as pan originally, my mom looked at me and went, why can't you be a lesbian like your sister? Not the reactions I was expecting at all.
But they,
Both times I just kind of, what am I supposed to do with that?
my first. Sorry, were you done? I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah, I'm done. Go ahead.
The first family member that I actually came out to was my uncle, my mom's brother, because I knew he was gay. I had a feeling, and my mom had told me once. She had like didn't. She chose not to tell me for a long time because she thought I was going to like take it bad or whatever. Which anyway, but I told him, and I actually was going to go because my uncle lives in Australia. I was going to go and stay with him for like a couple months during the summer. And because of that, I wanted to come out to my mom because he knew, and I was going to spend like 2 months or so in Australia. So I decided to tell my mom on Mother's Day. Yay, happy Mother's Day. And it wasn't. So my mom cried. She didn't cry because she was disappointed. She told me she was crying because she knew her brother had a very hard life being gay, and that she didn't want that for me. So that was that. That was. I mean, at first it was little like, oh my mom, God, my mom's crying, but she quickly told me why. So my mom's been very accepting of it. And I'm very glad of that. And of course, my uncle's accepting of it because, well, he's gay as well. But yeah, it was very nerve wracking on my mom. I mean, I chose Mother's Day. I don't know why I chose Mother's Day. Like, I mean, I was leaving to go to Australia in like 10 days, so it kind of was like time's ticking away. Because in my mind, like I kind of made it like I have to tell my mom before I go. Um, but
I could have also been subconsciously thinking that she'd be happier because it was Mother's Day,
maybe
making it easier to approach.
Well, I mean, I kind of looking back, I kind of think I felt as if knowing me on a deeper level is kind of like a gift upon itself.
Yeah.
Not saying that like in a conceited way, just saying that like for parents to know their children in a deeper way is like I
And the fact that you felt comfortable enough going to her to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I was still very nervous. Like I didn't I knew my mom accepted her brother in that, but it's always different when it's your own child.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and like my best friend, he never had to come out. Not because like we all knew, because we didn't. It was like he just came home, came to a parent dinner at his parents' house with his boyfriend, and that was that. Like he didn't say, "Oh, I'm gay" or anything. He just which is not a very common occurrence. Well, maybe now, but back when this was all happening about 20 years ago, it wasn't a common occurrence. But he had a very, I don't know, a seamless coming out with like not having to say anything. Just here's my partner. That's it.
I had a lot of friends when I had come out basically look at me and go, "There was no closet door on the closet you came out of, that I didn't have to come out." And I'm all like, "What the hell do you mean?" I had to come out to myself for one,
Yeah.
and accept the fact that this was a thing, because I went years bouncing back and forth, and like big reason why I had children was the idea of I'm gonna do what is considered to be one of the most feminine things on the face of the planet, and if it's not right, then this isn't just a phase, and my religious family isn't right. And I hated being pregnant. I love my children. I love the fact that I have them. I hated being pregnant. Oh my god. The feeling of them kicking, all of that just was not okay. And afterwards, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm done pushing this off. I'm done denying it. And I pushed through with my transition.
And Ben commented too. He was met with skepticism. Yeah, I was like, my mom wasn't skeptic, but actually my friend who didn't have to come out, he actually was very skeptical of me when he actually I didn't even tell him. I told one girlfriend, and she of course told everyone else. And like one day, like he was like, Sean, you're not gay. It's just a phase. And then he actually started to say that I don't remember the exact words, but he was kind of like saying like I'm going through that phase myself, but he stopped himself from finishing the sentence. But yeah, he actually, I would say he was the most resistant to me coming out as gay, and it literally wasn't all that bad. He basically just said like I think it's just a phase, and that was that. So I mean, like from my experience, I think my coming out was fairly a tame experience compared to a lot of other people I know. I have friends who were kicked out. I have friends who, like I said, were like tied to the basement. I have, it's, but all these people I'm talking about, most of them are all like, it's like this was like 15, 20 years ago. I mean, the pendulum is swinging back the other way, unfortunately, but we really have to resist and make sure that pendulum doesn't go too far.
Yeah.
And
I know I got to do more research, but I think there's been a few protests across Canada for trans rights since everything's been hitting the fan with the US.
mhm,
I definitely got to look more into it.
yeah, yeah, we got it, and that's for me. Um, I mean, I know I'm not an American, but I have a lot of American friends who are LGBTQIA2S. Sorry, it's just nerve wracking seeing what they have to go through.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I know for myself personally, if I wanted to go to the States, which I don't currently, but if I wanted to go to the States, I have a chance of being detained at the border because the fact that my gender markers on my ID don't match my gender markers on my birth certificate yet.
Yeah,
I'm in the process of getting that changed. But because of that, they with the state of the U.S. and what they're doing, uh, they will either turn you away or they'll detain you.
Yeah.
and detaining you under the guise of having fraudulent uh, documents,
Yeah.
which is insanely scary. And I've got friends who are trans in the States that are having issues accessing testosterone or their estrogen. I've got friends that have been denied their passports because they were up for renewal because their gender markers don't match. It's insane.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to go to the States at all because not just, I mean, I'm cis. That's not the issue. But I've been hearing a lot of stories about just like, even if like, you have like something on your phone, like a meme that was like anti-Trump. There have been like
Yep.
detaining people. So I'm not going to the States for at least 4 years. But yeah, I did have a question for you, which I think you already answered. But I just maybe you had to come out twice, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because a lot of trans friends I know had to come out because they
Yeah.
like they come out as either like I'm lesbian or I'm gay or whatever, and then like years later when I don't know when they've accepted being trans themselves, but eventually when they want to, I guess, socially transition, they have to come out again like, oh well, I'm trans man that like women, so I'm not a lesbian now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I kind of went through the process too of because I'd come out and then I'd go back to presenting female to try to appease my family members. I think I came out a total of like 3 different times. A fair amount of my friends that had watched me go through it just looked at me and went, "I'm not calling you by any gender. You are a JoJo. That is it. You have no gender. Ha." Because they got fed up of trying to bounce back and forth. And like I have a group of friends that are from my hometown where Moose and I both resided, and even when I was pregnant and I had chosen to start identifying as female, it refused to identify me as female and referred to me as the pregnant man. It was great. The amount of confused looks on conservative people's faces was hilarious.
Yeah.
And then when I finally chose to go through with my transition, my wicked witch of a stepmother decided to call me a whole slew of names and other stuff. And since then, me and my father haven't had a relationship
Hmm.
because he chose her side.
I'm sorry about that.
And like the thing I kept telling my dad, I'm like, you may not understand why I'm doing it, but you need to accept the fact that it's happening.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
And a lot of people don't realize, I mean, more for trans people, but for, I mean, most queer identifying people, that like coming out is, first of all, like I said, it's done in stages, but also it's a journey too, because for the longest time, I identified as gay, and I still do so because a lot of people are like, because I would say I'm probably more pan or homoflexible, which is on the bisexual scale.
Yeah.
But people just look homoflexible. What the hell is that? Is that just one of those other 1,000 new genders that come out? So I just identify as gay.
That's like explaining to people that I'm demisexual, which is under the ace umbrella,
Yeah.
meaning you have to have an emotional connection and an intellectual connection with someone before you can find them attractive. Haha.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has zero to do with parts.
Yeah, exactly. Hearts, not parts. But yeah, no, it is like a pathway to discovery, and I think once, well, for me, anyways, accepting that I was gay, opened your mind up to, well, not for everyone though, because I do know gay men who are transphobic, unfortunately, but it just opened up your mind for a lot of people to like other things, because there was a point in time when I did consider myself non-binary, anyways, to a point. Because, well, I mean, like, I still struggle feeling masculine. Like, I know I present masculine, but, you know, like, there's, I guess, the patriarchy and the misogyny in the world just makes me feel like I'm not a man because I'm not, I don't know, I don't like, well, I like playing sports. I don't like watching sports. I don't really like talking about sports. You know, that's a stereotype, but that's the type of, you know, pressure that people, you know, get put on from society. Like, you're not a man if you don't do this, 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 and this, you know? So I guess, like, I'm still struggling on that side. Like, I'm not struggling with my
Gender identity.
but I'm just struggling on, like, what is masculine for me,
Yeah.
because that too is like a personal journey as well. Like, anyways,
Yeah.
there's
No, and that's fair. Because even myself, being trans mask, I'm very much still non-binary, and I think I don't know. It's more so to try to mess with people's heads because that's fun, than it is anything else. Because I'm comfortable with what I'm comfortable in. If you don't see it as particularly masculine, that's not my problem. That's your problem.
yeah, and I mean, and like, I mean, someone said before, it's like sexuality, what your sexual orientation is, none of your business. To be honest, someone's gender identity is, if you're not, if they're, you don't really know the person, it's none of your business. You accept them for your face value, and, you know, I mean, I know not a lot of people are into asking pronouns, but I mean, like,
It's an important thing to do.
yeah.
And it's not that difficult. You introduce yourself, you say your own pronouns, and generally people follow suit.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember when I was younger, a new kid came to school, and the teacher introduced him as I forget his, but anyways, he was Italian, and introduced him as his like birth name. But he preferred to use his baptismal name. So we all, you know, he told us, nope, don't call me this, call me, I don't know, Joseph or whatever I think it was. So, you know, and that was just like, yeah, sure, we'll call you Joe. There was no problem. There was, you know, and that's how it should be for, like, pronouns as well. And also, like, for, well, a lot of trans people do, you know, have a dead name because they want a name that more matches what they feel inside.
Yeah. And like I will admit, my dead name is like my chosen name is not far off my dead name, but I'm also autistic and suck with change.
Mhm. Okay, so just we have 3 minutes left. So I do want to again just say thank you.
Tap, tap.
Yeah, tap 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 tap. Tapping is clapping. You can share, but like I said, we're ending in 2 minutes. So if you just click on the arrow and go to copy link, TikTok still registers as a share, even though you may not be pasting that link anywhere. But I want to thank everyone.
Thank you to everyone.
Thank you for everyone for attending. We're going to be back next week, same bat time, same bat channel. No, I don't know. Same gay time, gay channel. No. But yeah, do you have a final thought?
For our first live, I think it went pretty well.
Yeah.
Over the next week, though, I think we should communicate more to make it a little bit more cohesive.
Yeah. I think that will definitely come along the way.
Yeah. But thank you to everybody that came up, everybody that's been in the live to support us for our first show. I know it was a bit kind of garbled, but it's learning how to figure out this thing because I suck at technology. So,
And I suck at public speaking. So I'm actually kind of proud of myself for doing this. So I'm going to tap
you've
myself.
done awesome.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, so if you want, stay tuned. We'll be sending out a promotion next week about what our topics are going to be. Usually always the back end or the last half of the show will always be open for people to come up, ask questions, talk about whatever we talked about that day or whatever. But yeah, so I will give Pasty last word before I put on some music to dance out to.
I really hope to see all of you guys next week. Also, follow Beaver Politics if you're not already doing it. There's a different show every day of the week, sometimes two. Also, if you'd like, you can join the team in the little heart that's beside the name. That'll help give you notifications in order to know when we're on lives. There's also the subscription, which gives you special stickers and also notifications to when we're live. But thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.